Fleeced, how Barack Obama, media mockery of terrorist threats, liberals who want to kill talk radio, the Do-Nothing Congress, companies that help Iran, and Washington lobbyists for foreign governments are scamming us, and what to do about it. By Dick Morris and Eileen McGann. Narrated by Johnny Heller. Copyright 2008 by Eileen McGann. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with HarperCollins Publishers and was produced in the year 2008 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Introduction. Fleeced, stripped of money or property as a sheep is stripped of fleece. Obtained by unfair or unjust means. Plundered. Deprived of money or belongings by fraud or hoax. Swindled. Fact: the mainstream media in America is distorting the news to deliberately downplay terrorism. The Society of Professional Journalists has actually recommended that reporters avoid using word combinations such as Islamic terrorist or Muslim extremist. Fact: even when terrorists are caught targeting high-profile facilities in New York City, like the Brooklyn Bridge and JFK Airport, the New York Times, along with the rest of the national media, works overtime to convince us that the threat was artificial and overblown. Fact: if liberals win the White House and Congress in 2008, they plan to kill conservative talk radio by requiring stations to balance their content by broadcasting extreme liberal opinions and forcing stations to install liberals in top management positions. Fact: Barack Obama says he will double the capital gains tax rate. This could trigger a sell-off in both the stock market and real estate market between Election Day and the first of the year. Fact: Barack Obama claims to be fiscally responsible, but he has publicly proposed tax increases that will amount to more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. If the Democrats win the White House, Americans making $100,000 or more could be paying almost 60% of their income in taxes. Fact: the Do-Nothing Congress is still doing nothing. The U.S. Senate and House of Representatives held roll call votes on less than a third of the workdays between January 1st and March 31st, 2008. Fact: the three major presidential candidates of 2008, all senators, have virtually stopped doing their Senate jobs. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John McCain were present on only 5 of the 20 days of Senate roll call votes in the first 3 months of 2008. Fact: under our very noses, foreign companies like Shell, Repsol, Siemens, Hyundai, BNP Paribas, and others are helping Iran's repressive regime stay in power, even though it is developing nuclear weapons. And it's our state pension funds that invest in these companies, enabling them to come to the Ayatollah's aid. Fact: credit card companies made $30 billion in profits last year by charging interest rates that would make mafia loan sharks blush. And they collect a hidden fee of 2% on virtually everything sold in the nation, a fee that's then folded into the cost of almost everything we buy. Fact: 1/3 of all card holders pay interest rates above 20%, and late fees and other penalties have tripled in the last 10 years. Fact: hedge fund billionaires like George Soros make astronomical incomes each year and pay only the lower capital gains tax rate on their income. Hedge fund employees pay less in federal taxes than other Americans. On average, they pay only 15% of their income in taxes, while other Americans pay up to 35%. And it's the Democrats, yes, the Democrats, who are protecting them. Fact: EADS, European Aeronautics, Defense and Space, the French company that owns Airbus, recently won a huge U.S. defense contract, beating out Boeing and costing Americans tens of thousands of defense jobs. So now our tax money is going to create their jobs. Fact: lobbyists and lobbying firms close to the presidential campaigns of Hillary Clinton and John McCain were paid millions of dollars to lobby for EADS and to use their influence to steer the contract away from the American company. Fact: Each year, foreign governments, including Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, spend millions of dollars lobbying our Congress in trying to persuade the American public on the validity of their often troublesome positions. Fact: while record numbers of homeowners were forced into foreclosure, Angelo Mozillo, the former CEO of Countrywide Financial Corporation, one of the largest providers of subprime home mortgages, was paid $100 million in 2006. When he was forced out in 2008, he left with a pension and retirement package estimated at more than $60 million. Fact: Countrywide announced a $1.2 billion loss in the third quarter of 2007 and another $422 million in the fourth quarter. By the end of the year, the price of the company's stock fell by 80%. During the same time, Mozilla received a $1.9 million annual salary and $20 million in stock awards and sold $121 million in stock. He told Congress that his shares had grown in value by 23,000%. Fact: Countrywide subprime loans for 120,000 homes were in foreclosure at the end of 2007, and the company laid off 12,000 workers. Fact: the FBI is investigating Countrywide for alleged securities fraud for misrepresenting its financial position and the performance of mortgage loans and securities filings. Fact: Bill Clinton is a partner in a global investment fund with the Emir of Dubai, one of the United Arab Emirates, UAE states. His recently released tax returns suggest that his income from involvement with the fund could be as much as $15 million. Fact: Hillary Clinton says that the United States should retaliate against Iran if it attacks the UAE, Kuwait, or Saudi Arabia. No other president, presidential candidate, or senator has ever suggested that we go to war under these circumstances. Is it any wonder that Americans feel fleeced at every turn? And it could get even worse. If the Democrats win the 2008 presidential election, you'd better hold on to your shirt. Because without a doubt, you're going to be fleeced. There's no question that federal taxes will go up. Income taxes, Social Security taxes, capital gains taxes, and estate taxes. Spending will go way up too, and the size of the bureaucracy will likely swell. About the only thing that might go down is your morale. Our presidential candidates spread the message of optimism, the audacity of hope. Yet unnoticed in this inspirational rhetoric are plans to pass the largest tax increase in history, to introduce rationing to our health care system, to weaken our defenses against domestic terrorism, to cripple our efforts to reform education, to let criminals and crack dealers out of prison, and to send our economy into a downward spiral. Once the Democrats' health care programs are implemented, it will mean the beginning of socialized medicine in the United States. If a politician like Hillary Clinton should ever have her way, the government will even garnish the salaries of workers who don't have health insurance. Big government and Big Brother will be on patrol. There's more to be concerned about. Democrats will be pouncing on social and cultural issues too. One of their first priorities will be to reinstate the fairness doctrine. They won't be happy until they destroy talk radio by requiring a liberal response to every conservative program. Imagine a policy that would require ABC Radio to give Alan Colmes a 3-hour daily talk show to offer a contrasting view of Sean Hannity's opinions, or compel Fox News to offer an hour a day to Rachel Maddow to disagree with Bill O'Reilly. No thanks. But that's what they want. The first chapter of this book describes in great detail what you can expect from a Barack Obama presidency. In short, how we'll all be fleeced by spending and taking policies and plans for bigger and bigger government. This book is really about the far too many ways Americans are routinely fleeced by our politicians, banks, credit card companies, mortgage companies, foreign countries, and domestic corporations that are trying to set the agenda for our Congress and executive branch, and labor unions who fatten the coffers of the union treasury by luring members into questionable investments. We'll name the worst offenders and suggest some practical ways to turn the tide. Here's a good example of how credit card companies are fleecing consumers. 20 or 30 years ago, every state had laws prohibiting usury. Only mafia loan sharks collected interest rates of 20 or 30%. But Supreme Court decisions stripped the states of their power to regulate credit card interest, and the political clout of the companies has stymied congressional attempts at regulation. So while the 6 credit card companies that monopolize the industry post annual profits of $30 billion, tens of millions of us are chasing our tails, trying in vain to repay our credit card debt. It's not that we owe too much. The average balance is only $13,000. It's that we can't repay the principal while we're trying to keep current with the 20 to 30% interest. In the meantime, the credit card companies use the slightest pretext to impose penalty charges, which have tripled in the past decade. This plastic fleece hampers our economy. It reduces our buying power and makes debtors of too many of us. But Congress won't act because its members are on the take, receiving millions in contributions from the credit card companies, money they receive by overcharging us. As we identified many of these critical problems that cry out for national attention, one thing became quite obvious. The White House and Congress appear to be AWOL. They're not doing very much. Who's calling the shots instead? Big media, big business, big government, big labor, and big lobbyists. And their self-serving agendas are doing nothing to help the ever-increasing number of American people who are losing their homes, paying credit card interest rates higher than 25%, and finding their jobs outsourced to foreign countries. Consider this. 3 banks that suffered huge losses because of the subprime mortgage disaster gave huge rewards to the stewards of their downward spiral. Merrill Lynch CEO Stan O'Neill left the company with $161 million after the company's stock crashed by 80%. Citigroup CEO Charles Prince left with $68 million after the company's value dropped by $64 billion. And Countrywide CEO Angelo Mazzillo pocketed more than $100 million after the company's shares slumped from $45 to $5 a share. Countrywide was eventually sold for about 1/6 of what its market value had been only a year before. Where were Congress and the White House during all this? Nowhere. Isn't it time for our senators and congressmen to stop fleecing us and start doing something for us instead of spending all their time raising money for their own campaigns and patting the backs of the special interests? Is it any surprise that only 14% of Americans approve of the job that Congress is doing, or that is, not doing? Things are getting worse as they do nothing. There are 45% more foreclosures at stages from the dispatch of the first default notice to bank seizure of property in January 2008 than a year earlier. 3 states led in the mortgage mess: Texas with 14,669 foreclosures, Florida with 10,334, and California with 9,354. And the foreclosures aren't likely to stop anytime soon. We hear a lot of concern from the presidential candidates about the mortgage crisis. They have a lot of ideas, they say. But unfortunately, that's all they are, ideas. The fact is that the 3 senators who dominated the race through much of 2008, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, and Barack Obama, all but quit their day jobs in January 2007 when they announced their candidacies for president. Since then, they've rarely shown up in the Senate, have paid little attention to their responsibilities as senators, and have done almost nothing to solve the very problems they claim to be so concerned about. All they've done is talk about how they'll solve the mortgage crisis when they get to the White House. We need a lot more than just talk. Yet, for all their absences, they haven't completely lost contact with the Senate. Even though they don't show up for work, they faithfully pick up their paychecks. That's $165,000 a year for doing nothing. Can you imagine telling your boss that you wanted to spend your next 2 years campaigning full-time for a more important, higher-paying job, but you still expected to be paid for your current job, which you'd be completely ignoring? It wouldn't work. And it shouldn't work for members of Congress either. If they don't want to do their jobs for 2 years, they should resign. Why on earth should the taxpayers subsidize their irresponsibility? It's one of the reasons we feel fleeced. It's time for some accountability. Do your job, senators, or resign. By the way, it's not as if their working conditions are onerous. Apparently, Congress has never heard of the 5-day work week or the 8-hour day. Those annoyances are for other people, not them. So far this year, they've scheduled votes an average of only about 1.5 days a week. And by days, we don't mean anything like a normal work day. Congressional voting days sometimes last no more than a few minutes. Nice work if you can get it. What kind of leadership can we expect from Washington if its most prominent leaders won't even set foot in the place? During her last Senate campaign, Hillary Clinton hoodwinked the voters of New York into believing that she wasn't really going to start running for president as soon as the votes were counted. She repeatedly said that she was interested only in being the best senator she could possibly be. But she's actually turned into the worst senator she could possibly be. That is, an invisible one. While no one's minding the store, there's been a marked increase in foreign bailouts of American banks and companies. When Citibank ran into trouble, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, a sovereign wealth fund with assets estimated to be as high as $875 billion, jumped in and invested $7.5 billion in Citigroup. And one of Abu Dhabi's smaller funds, Mubadala Development Company, recently bought stakes in the Carlyle Group and Advanced Micro Devices. Abu Dhabi is the capital of the UAE, the oil-rich country that includes 7 states, including Dubai. Dubai is everywhere. In recent years, Dubai-based firms have bought Barney's, the upscale clothing store, the Essex House Hotel, now the Jumeirah Essex House in New York City, the Travelodge hotel chain, Lohman's, the discount women's clothing store, and Madame Tussauds, the legendary wax museum. The state of Dubai has a stake in Daimler Chrysler, the German car maker, and recently entered the gambling business when it purchased a 10% stake in the MGM Mirage Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Through its purchase of the Doncaster's Group, a British engineering firm, Dubai now owns several plants in the United States that produce military equipment. It also holds a stake in Airbus, the recent winner of a huge Pentagon contract. It has invested in HSBC, one of the major banks hit hard by the subprime mortgage crisis. Senator Charles Schumer of New York articulated his concern about Dubai's purchase of a 20% stake in NASDAQ. While I am and have been a big proponent of foreign investment in the United States, we must still be careful of the kinds of investments made in our critical infrastructure, financial exchanges, utilities, and other areas that are vital to the operation and security of our country. He's right about that. Dubai has some prominent advocates in the United States. Former President Bill Clinton is a partner with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Emir of Dubai, and the investor Ron Burkle of the Yucaipa companies in a global investment fund. As the spouse of a U.S. senator and presidential candidate, should Clinton be in business with a foreign leader? Regardless of how the Clintons characterize the arrangement, it appears that Clinton is a partner in a sovereign wealth fund, a fund holding a foreign state's money. Is this appropriate? When Mrs. Clinton finally released her tax returns in April 2008, they showed that the former president was paid more than $15 million for his consulting with Yucaipa. The Clintons didn't disclose how much came from this highly unorthodox arrangement with the ruler of Dubai, nor did they say what Bill Clinton did for the millions. Since Hillary can vote in the Senate on issues that affect Dubai, it's time for the Clintons to come clean. Shouldn't we make sure that these widespread foreign investments, especially by oil-rich companies, cannot be used for political purposes or endanger our national security before we permit the massive infusion of foreign capital into our system? The question becomes even more relevant after Hillary Clinton's stunning suggestion at the Philadelphia debate that the United States should retaliate against Iran if it attacks the UAE, Saudi Arabia, or Kuwait. Did her husband or his partner, the Emir, suggest this crazy idea? Dubai's lobbyists are among the most aggressive in the world. The country's hired firms close to the Clintons, such as the Glover Park Group, where Hillary Clinton's campaign spokesman, Howard Wolfson, is a partner. He's on leave during the campaign, and other former Clinton officials now work. And Burson Marsteller, headed by Clinton's recently demoted top strategist Mark Penn, represents both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Its sister company, Quinn, Gillespie & Associates, also represents Dubai's interests. The Quinn of the firm is the former Clinton White House counsel Jack Quinn, who successfully lobbied President Clinton to pardon the fugitive financier Mark Rich. It's one big cozy circle. In 2006, Dubai's deputy ruler, Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum, was sued in a U.S. federal district court in Miami for allegedly encouraging the enslavement of thousands of underage boys to work as jockeys in his native country. The sheikh responded by hiring a prominent D.C. lobbying law firm to convince the Justice Department to intervene. The suit was eventually dismissed. Nice job by the lobbyists. Too bad for the kids. This raises an important question. Why do we permit foreign agents to influence our government? Why, for example, should we permit the Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez and the leaders of other oppressive regimes to propagandize in the United States? They have no constitutional right to free speech in the United States. The agendas of the lobbyists for foreign countries are often at odds with the needs of American workers and companies, and they take up valuable official government time in their efforts to convince public officials to grant their wishes. Let's keep them out of our government's business. At least 146 foreign countries have hired lobbyists in Washington to represent their interests before Congress, the State Department, the U.S. Trade Representative, the Foreign Aid Program, the Defense Department, and the White House. These countries include some of our most dubious friends: China, Russia, Libya, and Saudi Arabia. They include some of the most egregious violators of human rights, as cited by our own State Department. Yet they've been able to hire former cabinet and sub-cabinet officials, as well as former senators and congressmen, to plead their case at the highest levels most of us can never reach to express our opinions. They hear the voices of the foreign agents, not the American public, and it shows in our country's policies. If we want to avoid being fleeced in the next administration, we need our voices to be heard in November, because one thing is certain: the next election will lead to a big difference in our national policies. It's time to make other public officials understand that we'll no longer be fleeced. In our last book, Outrage, we identified a series of policies and events that enraged Americans. Those rip-offs were bad news, to be sure, but they weren't part of a large pattern with international repercussions. In contrast, many of the shenanigans we address in this book are threatening to send the world into economic chaos, a crisis that could be as bad as the one Osama bin Laden triggered in 2001. Consider the new paradigm that has developed in our capital markets. Banks are begging sheikhs for money. Investment banking houses are failing and being bought up for peanuts with the help of foreign investors. And the real estate market is writhing in pain and dragging down the entire economy. It's a mess. What caused this catastrophe? Not war. Not even a terror attack. It was triggered by greed. Simple, self-serving greed, which led the very, very rich to try to get even richer by manipulating the credit markets, government guarantees, and gullible consumers in the biggest mortgage scam in history. There will always be enough gullible and foolishly optimistic borrowers who borrow money they can't afford to repay. The federal government will always subsidize bad loans, either inadvertently or because of corrupt indifference. But unless those who knowingly induce consumers to sign on a dotted line face financial and criminal penalties, they'll just keep on doing it. We are not a nation that thrives on class warfare. Class consciousness just isn't the American way. When a rich capitalist drives his Rolls-Royce past a factory gate in Britain, the workers think, that's not right. An American worker, on the other hand, would be more likely to think, my boy will have a Rolls like that someday. But the obscene gluttony we've seen in CEOs' pay and bonuses could light the fires of class warfare within our borders if this kind of thing isn't stopped. In his biography of Andrew Jackson, Sean Wilentz articulated the essence of the heritage of democracy in America. You can't make all people equal, he argued. Some will always be brighter, prettier, healthier, or more energetic than others. But you can eliminate the kinds of artificial inequality that are created by government favoritism. It's time we got serious about that task. Hedge fund managers, for example, are among the richest people in our country. George Soros made more than $3 billion last year. The hedge fund managers defend their salaries by pointing to the risks they took, the smart investments they made, and how hard they worked. But even so, their income is taxed at only 15% because they dress up their earnings as capital gains, while everyone else has to pay up to 35% in taxes. That's what Wilentz means by artificial inequality, and it has to end. Why hasn't it ended already? Why didn't the Democratic Congress that swept into office in 2006 put a halt to it? Because the Democrats won't close the loophole. They say it's because hedge funds are an important New York industry. But we suspect that it's really because the party receives 2/3 of all campaign contributions that come from hedge fund managers. John McCain is famous for attacking lobbyists and their influence peddling, yet he takes their money. Hillary Clinton greedily grabs every lobbyist campaign contribution she can. But the two candidates have something else in common. Both have close advisors at the very top of their campaigns who are tied, directly or indirectly, to lobbying firms for EADS, the European company that owns the aviation giant Airbus. Airbus recently sought funds from the U.S. Department of Defense, yes, that's right, American tax money, to build new tanker aircraft. The contract it was after was worth at least $40 billion and potentially up to $100 billion, and the U.S. firm Boeing and the state of Washington had been counting on that contract. But the rug was pulled out from under them by the lobbying firms that helped secure the contract for Airbus, the same firms that are connected with Clinton's and McCain's campaign advisors. And what of the young men and women who risk their lives to capture or kill terrorists before they can strike us? The heroism of these young men and women has led to the capture of 765 terrorists who have been sent to Guantánamo Naval Base to be locked up until the war on terror is over. But courts, liberal lawyers, and a cowed administration have released 425 of these anti-American militants. And now we're having to go out and recapture many of them or kill them because, thanks to our leniency, they're back in the field fighting us again. So Fleeced is dedicated to finding the culprits, exposing their deeds, and crafting remedies. As with outrage, we do so with the realization that knowledge can empower citizens to force change. When the lights come on, the cockroaches scurry for cover. Listen to this book and get out the roach spray. Chapter 1. President Obama. What would he do? This book will expose a disastrous array of fleeces that are conspiring to rob the American people of their money, their security, and their way of life. The worst among them, however, is what we'll all have to go through if Barack Obama takes office on Inauguration Day in January 2009. There's a strong chance that a Democratic winner would be accompanied by an overwhelming congressional majority, consolidating Democratic control over both houses. We believe that as many as 58 Democrats will be elected to the Senate, and the Democrats will extend their domination of the House. The beleaguered Senate Republicans may find it hard to summon the 40-plus votes they would need to sustain a filibuster and stop Obama from fulfilling his agenda. He would be able to do his will. But what will that be? Where would he take our country? Obama would take the country sharply, suddenly, and dangerously to the far left. He would raise taxes immediately and substantially, increasing the top bracket to at least 40%, lifting the cap on Social Security taxes, and doubling capital gains taxes and taxes on dividends. He would roll back the increases in the threshold for the inheritance tax passed under Bush. But his catastrophic intervention in our society would hardly end there. Obama would open the door wide to illegal immigration.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?